So I will just speak a little bit about our amazing speaker today. She is amazing, and I'm just excited to learn from her today. She is a founder, a director of Agora Insights Ltd, and she brings to the table over 25 years of experience, hands-on business delivery. Her knowledge base extends across business architectural design, strategic analysis, requirements, integrated systems, learning methodologies, certification, and spectrum of related fields. Throughout her tenure, she has had the privilege of empowering thousands of business professionals, of architects and analysts, and help them in their professional journey through a lot of training programs, a lot of personalized mentoring and consulting solutions. So we do have a very special person here today, a professional, and thank you so much for coming here and sparing this time for us today, 50 people. We know that we're not going to remain the same after this session, so we're pretty much eager to learn with you, Deirdre. And I'll pass the word to you, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. In New Zealand, we also like to be humble, so sometimes it's really awkward. But I suppose I do have some history, so I'm going to share the screen if that's good. Anyone that has been working and using AI, I welcome you to share your learnings as well, because this is a great forum for us. Oh, where have I shared this now? Wait. Can you see it on the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So it's just the presentation. You can't see my
just the
slideshow.
presentation.
Okay,
just the presentation. Yeah.
All right. So this is a super exciting field. And like I said, before everyone arrived, or before most people arrived, I'm a bit of a geek. So I do like to explore these things, and it's a really interesting field. And for anyone who is using it, well, actually, let me ask the question now. If you want to put your hands up, if you have been using AI for requirements or similar things in your work. There you go, Sid. I gathered that.
Yeah. So, I'll give you two examples of where we're using AI. One is we're trialing out Copilot, which is Microsoft's new technology that they've released to work with Office products. So trying to see that work with Teams in particular, so that it can summarize meetings and produce actionable notes and such. So that's kind of one, which is in a more corporate setting. The other one is more by way of, analyzing some of the data around mills and trucks coming into the mills and seeing, capturing the number plates and analyzing and assessing what kind of trucks have arrived, and then how long are they waiting at a parking station versus a loading versus tarping, and how long are they taking to exit. So that's another use case of an AI in action using digital twin technology to utilize that.
Okay, interesting. So you're doing that via Teams and probably Azure OpenAI?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so let's get going. I thank you for the introductions. The simpler way that I put it is I help business analysts and business architects achieve their learning goals. And we've been working in about 96 countries around the world. And I suppose that's thanks to, if you want to say it, COVID, for, just everybody going online and us really being able to engage. So today, the main things I'm going to talk about, and I know that this might be frustrating for those who want to get into the nuts and bolts, but I promise you, you're going to get detail from me. So don't you worry. But we're going to first discuss the role of the business analyst versus the architect. And this is going to be quite important in requirements. And I know it might not seem like it because often we just work on requirements. But as you know, businesses are quite complex. So what do business analysts do? Very short, what do business architects do? And how to effectively use AI for requirements. And I do think that as a BA, and I will give some references from Babak for those who've either been certified or those who are preparing for their certification. But as a BA, I want you today to think of what would your digital twin look like. So if you are a business analyst, what would you expect AI to do for you rather than trying to use it to give it instructions to get things? What would you expect the role to be as a digital twin? And obviously, I'm open for questions, so please feel free to put your hand up. If I spot you, I will certainly try answer your question. You can use the chat. I don't often check the chat when I'm presenting, but if somebody wants to give a shout out if there is a chat, and obviously just try keep it relevant to the topic for everyone's sake, not just mine. I can answer some level of detail. It depends on how long it's going to take. So I will shorten things just to ensure that everybody gets the overview of what we're discussing. I could probably discuss this in many hours, at least a day. So I'm trying to give you a snippet of what you can do, and you'll get a live example. So to start, it's Business Analysis Day on the 1st of November for those who are celebrating it. And last year, there was this great comment that said, a business analyst is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by those with questionable knowledge, which I thought was really amusing. And Daniel, who's a fellow colleague and friend of mine based in Canada, he said, sounds less accurate if a decent business architecture practice was in place to assist business analysts and business in their requirements, epics, and user stories. And this is setting the scene for our conversation today around what does AI need to give you a good set of requirements? And it's going to be about the knowledge that we are trying to acquire. So I like to term analysts, and I have played the role. I can promise you that having worked in multiple different businesses, as well as worked with BAs from around the world, you guys experience the same problems. It doesn't matter if you're in Canada, if you're in the US, if you're in New Zealand, if you're in oh gosh, I don't know where all the 96 countries are, UK, you know, the normal ones, but it doesn't matter if you're from Africa, Asia, BAs experience the same problems. And I think that's good because it means you've got a common language and it means that you understand each other. But typically what we do in organizations is we would investigate. So we want to understand what is the need of the organization. So if you think of Beckham, what is the need? What is the solution? What is the change? Who are the stakeholders? You know, really covering the who, what, why, when, how. And I like to use the term investigative journalist because you have to communicate that information to the business, and you have to almost create several articles, if you want to call it that, to communicate with the business. And so it really is a boots in the ground type of role where you are trying to understand a specific area that needs research and analysis and requirements so that the business can do the changes that are required. Architecture, on the other hand, looks at the ecosystem and the ecosystem of the organization and how things affect other things. What are the critical areas that we focus on? How things would work together? And so you can imagine as BAs, and for those who are long experienced, I'm not saying old, I'm just saying experienced, you will have probably experienced there will be an initiative in one area and it impacts another initiative in another area or project in another area. And you might be duplicating efforts. You might be using the same requirements. There might be an impact. CRM is a classic example of this, where all these different business units are busy doing CRM and you end up with database structures that are highly complex. So when we look at architecture, and particularly business architecture, we want to understand the ecosystem of the organization. And this is so that when we are changing things, we understand the impacts that occurs beyond just the particular project. And therefore the requirement that is needed. And the other thing to consider is that we want to understand how the information and the data will be affected by it. So we want to understand the ecosystem. This is really important. And a simple way to divide that is business architects often work at the breadth of the organization, understanding the overarching perspective, and analysts usually work at the depth. There is no more important. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two, and they are both really important roles to play in business. So one is really executing the change in terms of actually being specific around the delivery, and the other one is overlooking the change. Now, I love to use the metaphor of a house. So if I use it, and there's lots of metaphors, then just bear with me. So all businesses have architecture, but not all businesses have been architected. So we know there's houses all over the world, and we know some have great architecture, and we know that some don't. And business is no different in that sense. It's quite an important concept to understand, because when we look at change in business, we've got to think of a house, right? If we go in and we say, oh, we want to put a new bathroom in a new bedroom, without understanding where the plumbing is, what the impact on the other rooms will be, how this will affect the building, we're not doing good architecture, right? Because architecture, we have to understand the house in order to understand the change in the house. And so when we look at requirements, we have to start with architecture in order to understand what good requirements are. And in chapter 7 of your BABA guide, we talk about quality requirements. And so, and I do like to also distinguish in the digital world, we use terms like digital transformation for projects, which is highly unlikely it's a digital transformation. So let's just clear up some terms. Number one, when we have digitization, this is when we take a piece of paper and we convert it to a document like a PDF. That's going digital. When we have digital enhancement, this is where we take a process and it could be some other things, but it's an operating step. And this could be changed into several things, like it could be automated, it could be optimized, it could be done. So we talk about enhancement, a digital enhancement. And when we do digital transformation, we change our operating model. And so that image that I showed you of the river, that would be changing the direction of the river. And so it's quite important. And the reason I use these examples is because AI is a language model. You use the wrong word, you get in the wrong output. And so it's important to understand that language and what we do as business analysts is very much the way we communicate, the way we manage information, the way we interpret information is all about the words that we use and the way we explain things. So for instance, a user story is a bunch of words put together to logically come up with a conclusion for the developers. But those are just words, and AI works the same. So your terms are important. In reality, your business doesn't really look like a house drawing. It looks a little bit more like this, pretty complex. And so we try keep things simple with architecture. We want to simplify. I imagine if you draw everything in what's happening in the house, it will also look something like this, with all the sewage and the water and the electrician and, all of those components, all the products, etc. And so with architecture, we like to do some conceptual modeling to simplify the thing. And I always like to remind people that when an architect draws your house, it's not an actual house. Okay, this is important because when we do design, both in requirements and when we look at our architecture, these are concepts. These are not real things. These are concepts. So these are important things to learn, but mostly language. So almost at the AI bit, I've alluded to some of it. So the difference between what business architects and what business analysts do is, you can imagine business architecture is building a library and a catalog of what our business does. So it's building a set of information around the business, but it's not trying to analyze the books and so forth. Although it does catalog and categorize these books and this information that we have. Whereas a business analyst would take out some information and typically, just as the quote said, you would have to go and talk to hundreds of people and write notes and have workshops and all of those kind of things to gain knowledge. But you would have to find information. And so if you have a knowledge base, as in architecture, you will find that information a little bit quicker. And obviously, this is where AI can help you with that bridging. So analysts would look at a specific point of information or data and really try to understand that. So we have to understand where requirements come from. And so I do use both the body of knowledges to describe this. At a macro level, when we look at architecture, and this is really the ecosystem that I was discussing, you look at not only your organization, but what flows in and out of your organization. So the policies, the partners, the vendors, there could be a new law that gets enforced. You might have to, change language, change words, different way of working. So we look at a macro level, and what we do is we try to build our library, or our knowledge base, as we call it. And we build a library of information concepts. So if you go to a library and you go and look for a book, you'll say, I want a fiction or a non-fiction, and the librarian will direct you into where to find that information. And these are similar principles to try relate it. And so then we look at a strategic level, and at a strategic level, we look at supplementing, we look at creating the vision, mission of what our strategy is. We look at our current capabilities. We look at what the business can do, and we want to understand where do we want to go in the future. So I like to use the example of Supreme Coffee, which is a made-up coffee shop in New Zealand. And Supreme Coffee is looking to franchise across the globe. And we'll look at a case now with AI where Supreme Coffee is looking to redo their brand. So the strategy here would be, we want to rebrand so that we are more appropriate internationally than just a local coffee shop. And then you'd have a set of initiatives. So there'd be several things we'd do. We would look at changing our brand design. We would look at our maybe our systems that we are using. We'd look at our marketing, we'd have a marketing project and so forth. So we'd look at a program level, what would all the projects be to match our strategy? And then we'd look at our project and what are the requirements that we need in order to be able to deliver to our strategy and our initiatives. And so you have to think of a requirement has to fit into what the business needs at the end of the day. Now, you don't have to go too far, but we're getting there. So you've now got, okay, I've got this initiative and this is what I'm going to do. I just see there's a question here. I'll answer that. Is business architecture similar to the overlap with enterprise architecture? There's a lot of similarities. The difference between enterprise architecture, often enterprise architecture kind of encompasses it all. You can do business architecture as a standalone profession, just like you can be a BA without using Agile. The enterprise architecture has historically focused on the systems, and this is why I like to distinguish between business architecture and that. But depending on the methodology, there's several, like there's TOGAF, there's DODAF, there's Zachman frameworks. You can, as a business architecture, work in any of those frameworks, or you can work in as a standalone, because just like business analysis, business architecture is a profession. So you can work in several of these frameworks. I hope that makes sense. So you don't have to learn TOGAF, for instance, to be an architect. It's helpful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting you don't. I'm just saying it is helpful. All right, let's look at AI. Okay, so we've got a bit of an understanding, right? When you're talking about a business and you're talking about requirements, we need to have context. We need to understand why we're doing certain things. We need to look at our business and really try to understand what is happening in our business. And therefore, AI itself needs to know about your business. What is the business you're working in? Is this a financial industry? Is this a retail industry? So where would Supreme Coffee fit into this? It needs to understand its role. Now, this is a really funny concept, right? A lot of people think AI is just going to solve all your problems. So those who've tried ChatGPT, for instance, it has all this information and it almost ranks it by priority, right? Or by the most. You think of social media, right? So there might be an excellent article that's the most appropriate to you, but you're likely to get the most used article. So if you do not tell the bot what its job is, it might think you're a marketing assistant, because it does that a lot. And it uses terrible words like moreover. It's really my bugbear. It needs to understand the principles of architecture, again, understanding the context of the organization. It needs to understand structured outputs. What is it that it's going to deliver to you? What are you going to get from it? It needs, and this is the concept of a digital twin. It needs to create containers for requirements. In other words, we have to have a batch. Think of the library example that I gave you. There's a lot of information in the knowledge base. So you want to batch that information, and you want to take out a set of books that you're going to investigate, a set of information that you're going to investigate. And it needs good inputs to frame that architecture. So you have to write good questions, which you should be able to as a BA. So ask good questions. And it's pretty good at questions, and it's really good at user stories. So even if you frame it as a use case or a user story, it's pretty good at understanding that. All right, so now I'm going to show you, and this is just a custom bot that I've built for demonstration purposes, I've loaded the business architecture. I didn't go into extensive detail with Supreme Coffee because there are limits in the different systems that you use, but I've loaded the architecture and I've said, create a requirements container so that we're pulling out the books from the library for brand management. And remember I said, let's imagine Supreme Coffee is wanting to change their brand, right? To match a more global perspective. Although New Zealand's pretty good at a global perspective, I won't lie, but no, it's just the case. We'll start off with. So what it's done here is it's created a batch of concepts, let's call it that, like brand management. This is how we would define brand management. And these are architectural principles, so please don't worry about this. I'm going to get to the requirements. The business objects that would be involved in this. We'd look at the brand management, and then we'd look at the business units that would be involved and the stakeholders. And then I've said, okay, great. You've given me the architecture. You've given me almost a high-level business requirements. And now create 20 user stories. And there you go. Now, one thing that we have trained our robot to do is have traceability. So we know that this user story is linked to a specific capability within the organization, and that runs through. So as a brand manager, I want brand guidelines enforced so that our brand identity is consistent across all franchises. And you'll see that it's using multiple different stakeholders from that initial set of books that we pulled out of the library. So it's done a really good job. So I said, oh, all right. And I had a brief look, and remember, I've done this in 8 minutes. Now, obviously, you're going to have to verify and validate as it per Embark 7.2 and 7.3, the requirements that you have. Oops. So I think we're about here now. So it's created the user stories. And now I'm going to ask it to create acceptance criteria for the first user story, which is the brand manager. And I just gave it the unique ID so that it can trace it. And so now it has said the brand guidelines document exists containing visual identity, messaging. So it's given some really great acceptance criteria for that single user story. And when you're using AI, you should always break the instructions down functionally or do functional decomposition, because AI cannot manage large data sets. I'll go into that detail. But now it's taken one user story from our architecture, which then went into like a high-level business requirements set. And now it's created user stories. We've taken one user story, and now we're creating acceptance criteria for that one user story. And you can see things like brand manager reviews all marketing material, products. So that is just for that one user story. I know I've got lots of mouses going here. And then I've asked it to create functional functional requirements based on the acceptance criteria. So now it said the system shall allow brand managers to create, update, and publish brand guidelines. As one example. And I like the fact that it was showing which acceptance criteria was related to that particular user story. I know not all businesses use user stories, but in architecture, it's quite an easy way to do it. And it's not about being agile. It's actually just the data structures that it creates pretty well. Then I asked it to do non-functional requirements. And so it used the system a lot, which I didn't really like, and I'm going to ask it to correct itself. But the system shall allow access to brand guidelines based on user roles and permissions. And here it's using the acceptance criteria, like for this one here. And remember, non-functional requirements around the quality of the solution. And so here it says this the systems shall be available 24/7 with minimum 99% uptime. Now, again, you can have to validate and verify that this is what's the expectation, but it's going to be much quicker to do something like this in a workshop when you already have information than trying to discover the information. And so it has created these non-functional requirements, but they're all system related. And so I've asked it to create non-functional requirements that aren't only system related. And it's done that too. So for instance, franchisee partners shall notify employees to be brand ambassadors, shall nominate, responsible for educating co-workers and upholding brand standards. So really cool. It's clever. It's got a lot of history behind it, AI. So it's now you providing context for it to use. And it can rationalize these things. So I was pretty happy with that. And at this point, I thought, okay, create some more, create transitional requirements. And these would be things like franchise owners shall be given a 6-month grace period to align all locations to the updated brand guidelines. So a great example of transitional requirements. All of this is in chapter 2 of Babak, by the way, that describes the different types of requirements that you use. So everything that we're doing here, I'm following that triangle that they have around the different types of requirements. I've now just asked it to do another 20. And actually you will find with AI, it can do quite a lot of user stories, quite a lot. So you can imagine you follow this process over and over again, and you can get a really solid set of information. And it didn't repeat things, which made me very happy. I did instruct it, and part of the training of the bot was to tell it to keep the requirements atomic, concise. What is the other one? I think there's about 7 or 8 rules. So it knows the rules of creating requirements or user stories. Okay, next, I asked it to create a value stream. This is a business architectural concept using the business requirements or the set of books that we had. This is like a process. So it's not a process, but don't worry about it if you haven't heard about it before. But it's the key steps that would be required for us to deliver a new brand. And so this is what it's come up with. I'm going to go back a second. So a sample value stream. We want to deliver consistent brand experience. Now, remember, there could be several of these. And, you know, when there's changes that occur, there might be several processes that would need to be considered or several projects. So this could be almost considered as a single project. But there might be lots of projects which we call initiatives because they all band together. So it's listed the stakeholders. It said these would be the stages. You'd have to develop the brand strategy. You'd have to create brand guidelines. You'd have to educate staff and franchisees on brand standards. You'd have to enforce the brand compliance across the franchisees or the franchises, monitor brand consistency, and continuously improve brand strategy. Oh, thank you. Who's done the requirements, good requirements? Unambiguous, correct. And follow the exact same thing with AI when you speak to it. It's really good set there. Implementation free abstract. You might want to leave that one out for AI, but that is really good when you're talking to stakeholders, and definitely for a user story. You want to keep it abstract. So now it's given me the list of stages, what will be delivered, so the outcome, or we call it the value outcome, and the supporting capabilities which come from our architecture. Okay, so that's been really great. Remember, we started off with just dumping it with data, and this is what we're getting from it. Now I've said cross-map this, so these stages, with the user stories. So tell me, which user story should I use in the different stages that occurred in the value stream? So let's look at the first stage. Stage 1, develop a brand strategy. You would use user story 9, which is, as a sales manager, I want competitors' brands analyzed annually so that we differentiate. That's a cool idea. And it goes on. Now, let's just pause for the brand manager. I want brand guidelines enforced, and this is under create brand guidelines. So it's giving you the user stories, and if you see, it's also giving you user stories from the new batch I asked it to create. I think you can create hundreds, like literally you can create hundreds, and once you've got that batch, you might ask it to improve its work. Now, as you keep going with AI, it will give you less and less information, so you have to be aware that you might have to start new chats every time. It's a real pain. But it's because it can only handle so much data processing. The issue is the processing. It's like your RAM. That's a loose example, but it's like your RAM of your PC. You know, when you're running all these apps at the same time, and then it starts getting hot if you work on a Mac or any of those. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening here. Now I've asked it to estimate how long would it take, considering the number of stakeholders in the organization, which it got from the architecture I fed it. So it said, if you're looking at 10 core stakeholders, this is how long it would potentially take. Now, I get a lot of questions at this stage because BAs like to have actual answers. Remember when you're doing a project and you're analyzing it, you have no information, right? Unless you've got previous product information. So you still have to go and cross-check some information against what the bot is saying, but you will have more than nothing. So this is pretty important. Remember, it does have history associated with it. So getting more than nothing is better than nothing. Obviously, at this point, it would be really helpful to feed the bot some information around past projects so that it can start doing better measurements and analysis. So keep that in mind. So now I've decided to take the 10 stakeholders, the key stakeholders, and I'm asking it to tell me what these tasks would be for these key stakeholders. What do they need to do in order to deliver a new brand strategy for the organization? And they would have to have a brand manager who's going to lead the brand strategy 1 to 2 months, create brand guidelines, blah, blah, blah. So it's giving us a nice idea of the stakeholders. And if you look at this, it's not actually telling you the specific roles, but it's giving you the idea of the business units that would be involved. And I thought that was really good as well, that it could distinguish between individuals and business units that would have to do specific things. Of course, you're going to have to validate and verify this. I've now asked it to provide an initiative roadmap based on the information that we have this far. And it then gave us some phases. So the strategy and design phase, this is what we'd be doing. And we'd have the goals, the key stakeholders in those stages. And by this point, after 8 minutes, I was pretty happy with the outcome. And of course, you'd still have to validate and verify everything. And like I said, If you're doing workshops, you can go in with a batch of data and start, asking questions and researching and finding out information. So now is a really good time for you to ask questions too, in case you want me to clarify any of what I've just done.
I think my first question would be, I mean, it looked great that it generates all these things, but what did it take to build the bot so that it's able to do this? Like, how much effort was involved in that? Was it involved? Were you buying something off the shelf, or were there programmers or like professionals, coding the bot in a certain way? Or
yeah, there's three things to consider. The one is your knowledge base, right? That's a major component to consider, because the cleaner your data, the better the output. And depending what apps and tools and things you use in there, I use Anthropic. I prefer that to GPT-4 because it can handle more tokens. So the first thing is you have to have a good database set. It doesn't have to be extensive, and you don't have to put everything about your business in there, but you do have to have something. The second thing is that you do need to train the bot. The bot needs to know what it's meant to do. And so I have gone through a very long, arduous process with changing different, I went from ChatGPT to, the Anthropic, and I tested all of these different platforms to get it to work. It was an exceptionally frustrating process, but I now think, and this is what's called prompt engineering, I now think that I've got to the stage where it's getting the right information from me and the right data, and it's able to reason similarly to what I'm doing. So there is a bit of effort involved in building your bot. It depends on what type you're using, and it depends on what you want it to do. And then I suppose the third thing is really understanding why you have this, because do you need to keep updating your database? Do you want it to be dynamic? This is where complexity comes in. So if you want to just do a simple bot like this, which is going to use a simple database, but it's not going to feed back to the database, it's going to be pretty simple, then cool. Then the team is responsible for managing their data. But what we have done is we are now going to the next stage where the user stories, for instance, will be traced throughout the database and will be used on other projects and those type of things. That will take longer. The challenge that you'll have in AI is it changes so much. And so it is so fast. You cannot believe the rate at which it's growing. It's scary, actually. It's predicted, it's taken us from 93, when, the internet first arrived with those black websites and flashing lights, to today. It's estimated that AI, from where we are today to really being advanced, will take 4.3 years if you had to measure it the same. It's not a good measurement in terms of perfection, but it's just giving you an idea of how fast it's moving. I've had to change things so many times just in the last few months. But those, I would say, are the three key things to understand what you're trying to get out of your bot. It's managing your data, managing your instructions, and then managing your connections. I hope that helps you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it gives me a clearer picture because this is all very new.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
And it can be super overwhelming. And I say this in every session because people are like, this is really cool. What is it? But have a play. That's the best way. We in kindergarten at the moment with AI. So go and climb the ladders and get onto the swings and figure it all out. In 4 or 5 years, you might have to be at uni level understanding, but today you don't need to be. So good news. But yeah, go play on the ladders. Okay, was there another question? Didn't know if somebody else. No, it was no.
There's a question in the chat. Yes.
What is requirements container?
The last one, what are your thoughts on quantum computing being leveraged in AI? Not sure if you can see that.
I must be honest, I don't really know around the quantum computing, other than I suppose it would make sense if you want to say that. Handling. Okay, so they do things. I don't know if you're referring to things like managing vectors and breaking it down. There's a whole bunch of people doing this stuff now, Databricks and various other. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. I don't know much about quantum computing myself, so I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do look at how AI is trying to reduce the amount of data they're pulling from their data sources to manage their tokens. So that's what I know, but I'm not sure I can answer your question properly without sounding like an blabbering idiot or something like that. How good are the existing chatbots out of the box? Claude's the best. Claude 2. So I would definitely say try experiment with all of them. I'm not sure about Bard, to be honest. I tried it a little bit. I wasn't impressed. I like ChatGPT. ChatGPT-4 is really good. I feel like it's been trained by a whole bunch of salespeople. I'm not going to lie. And so sometimes the language that comes out is not great. 3.5, however, is really good at user stories. Really good. It understands, even if you give it a user story, it understands what it needs to do. So I really thought that was good. But I suggest that you have a play in all of those sandboxes, and see what works best for you. I see, Joe, you have a question.
Hi, Deirdre. Yes, please.
Hey.
My company recently came out with AI guidelines, and one of the red flags that they threw up was with ChatGPT. In case you put any proprietary information into it, it's consumed and it goes into the pool, which is for whatever purposes they need. And they actually recommended using Bing AI for business, in the fact that can be contained, in that whatever you put in there does not leave the sandbox. Do you know, have other AI companies been approaching it in that manner too, or are there any warnings in regards to proprietary information?
This is the biggest challenge, and I always say decide what you want to share, right? But you can use Azure, which I think so you've been using that, right? You can store it similar to what Bing has said. You can do it in AWS. What's it, man? Amazon, Amazon Web Services. They have Claude, which is great. I have started to experiment in AWS, but I actually use Poe to experiment with Claude, because that's the example that we have here in this video. So there are ways in which you can block it. Databricks is also looking at doing kind of containing data and making it even more robust as to what gets shared and what doesn't. And that should be part of the first discussion. What should we share and what shouldn't we? I think that you should also consider things like when you're doing user stories, like you can train the bot on abstract data. You don't have to give it your proprietary data. So you can make up cases and you can make a fake company name, and you can do all of that kind of stuff and get a very similar output without making it your company. and being very explicit. One thing we do quite well as business architects is we understand conceptual thinking. You can get a similar output even if it's not the physical data that you're using within your organization. So think about that. I hope that answers your question, Joe.
Very good. Thanks very much.
Okay. Just try to talk to Claude AI. It isn't available in my country. Where are you, Jay?
I had the same experience in Canada.
They recently opened, like literally this week, to all the different countries. This is why I went through Poe initially, because it wasn't available in New Zealand either, but it is available now. So definitely in Canada, definitely.
No,
I just thought maybe somewhere else completely.
no, Canada. No, it's Canada is not in the list of regions of it. United States is, but not Canada on their website.
Well,
For
luckily
Claude,
it
yeah,
is.
for Claude. Yeah.
But maybe try go via poe.com.
POE.com. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I'll show you some of the bots that you can use of ours as well, that we've loaded in there. Okay, I think that's going to answer your technical questions. And thanks for clarifying it's not in Canada. I don't know, maybe it's a South Park thing. So who knows? Is there a danger in after using the chatbot and training the results of my projects? Yes, if you're using a shared platform, it's the biggest hindrance. So try go for the Azure option, look at the Databricks, look at AWS, all of those options. Yeah. So there absolutely are challenges. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. Good question, Enrico. Yeah, the bot definitely hallucinates. It drives me absolutely crazy. So what happens is when you ask it too many questions, right? It starts going, I'll actually give you the examples a little bit, but it does hallucinate. It depends on the bot you're using as well. Some of it is really good. And hallucination just means it kind of goes into this dream world and then it makes stuff up and it gives you these fake links. And, you know, it kind of enters its like a dream world. I have no other way of describing it. But my worst experience that I've had recently, I asked the bot to do a strategy document for me. And it gave me some junk. And I said, I'm not sure where you got that from. And then it told me to find another bot to talk to. I'm like, what? And so I said, have you self-realized or something? You know, I was like, where am I going to find another bot? So yeah, that was really weird experience. But so who knows? I have definitely had to tell GPT it's making things up. Yeah, it definitely does. And that's why I say you've got to be so careful with the role, because it becomes this crazy salesperson that comes up with these crazy ideas which you don't really want to know about. All right, let's go into the next slide. Okay, so what you as analysts, architects, and AI are all doing, so we talk about the 3 A's, right? What you're all doing is you're gathering data, information in order to form some kind of knowledge. Now, AI at this point will not be able to do this bit for you. This is why I say for BAs, make sure, it doesn't work in Belarus either. Okay. Make sure that you focus on your skill set, on building your knowledge. You don't have to know all the details around everything, but you have to understand your knowledge. In terms of information, AI is really good at pulling data out and doing information, but only in batches. That will stop the hallucination. Yeah, Tom, 100% trust and verify, right? Trust but verify. So when you get information from AI, it's really good at pulling out data. It's got a lot of history. I know it thinks it's creative, but it's not actually creative. It's just working off patterns. That's my personal experience, and I'm sure other people will argue. But you want to take the information and you want to verify it and validate it. 7.2 and 7.3 of your Babak guide, which you should be doing anyway, but you're going to save a hell of a lot of time trying to package it all together. And I do advise you try do this before you run projects. If you have it embedded and if you have it all set up in your business, you know, those are all great things to have. And I always say, you know, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do for the business is you're trying to help them make good decisions. And that's really where your value sits. So think of the AAA. You've got your AI, your analyst, and your architect, and they looking at kind of what's going to be happening in the future. And the term novelty here is really important, because remember, even in Babak, it says you have to make assumptions. But you have to make educated assumptions around how things will work, because nobody knows the future. If we did, we'd know if we were going to win the lotto and we should spend the money on it or not. All right. We don't really need to go into this, but this is just the 10 things that business analysts usually do, and AI can certainly help you with this, like understanding the background of a problem and looking at your stakeholders. Reminding you of the requirements classification schema. So we looked at the business requirements, the stakeholders, and the solution requirements. All right, so I know we have spoken about some of this, but what can or cannot be done by AI? So I'm going to start with the cannot first. AI has difficulty understanding the complexity and nuances of hierarchical data. So it doesn't really know that something's more important than the other, unless you can absolutely specify it. But because it's running through data, because AI, when you give it instructions, is almost just like a text file. So it does struggle to understand some hierarchical information. It is improving, okay? And like I said, it's been exponential since I started at the beginning of the year, but there certainly are inconsistencies even now. Building the table, so if you're going to build a table like a requirements table, where you're going to have, this is the user story and this is the description and, you know, this is the status type of thing, it does lose context, because tables are quite complex for AI. It's quite good at text, but the minute you do tables, that requires more processing. So even just drawing the lines and things, it's not great. Yeah, and it also loses context. So again, the more tables and the more columns and rows that you have, the more it hallucinates. And then you have to manually intervene with your tables and verify them. AI repeated certain mistakes even after I corrected it. So I have this thing when I work with AI, I go, ugh, because you can't swear at it, right? And I've had my moments where I'm like, what is that? Especially when it told me I must find another bot. And I was like, what? I used and it's a way of being unhappy with what it's delivered. And it actually does work pretty well, but sometimes it forgets that I was unhappy with it and it had to improve that, and it just kind of loops back. It's almost like it's drunk too much and it forgot what it said the day before. So yeah. So I suppose it doesn't only hallucinate, it also drinks. As the table complexity increased, the AI's performance degraded, as I mentioned. So what is good? Let me get there. Absolute benefits. It's a game changer, guys. So if you should be playing in the sandbox, you should be exploring it. It's definitely going to be a thing. I cannot see that once people have started to employ this in organizations that you're going to go back. So it's better to learn it now and add it to your skill set. And it's not like you have to be a programmer or anything like that. It responds to prompts, to text. For now, it might use other things in the future, but learn now and try it out and have a play. AI is growing and learning very, 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 very quickly. So you need to keep framing it within your context, because it likes to be creative in the sense that it brings the universe to you, and then you end up with this random story. So make sure you do that. A deep understanding of business architecture principles will help with that and really help optimize your results. And then while AI like ChatGPT can serve as a valuable tool for BAs or BArchs, it's far from being able to replace your role. So I showed you that triangle. You're sitting on the knowledge area at the moment. AI is not there yet. It is very smart, and I have no doubt that there's going to be some crazy growth. So my advice is to become an absolute knowledge worker. For those who've just been documenting, you need to become analysts again, and you need to focus on analyzing the data and truly understand what you're getting back, and being able to critique your bot, because although it's a digital twin, it's your junior. It's like your PA, right? And you're going to have to say, hang on, where did you get this from? And really explain it in that way. So just quickly, we've created the ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP bots. They are completely free. It's an arduous process of getting there. At the end of the day, so it's hosted through our Poe bots that we've created, and so you have to go onto our site and sign up and blah blah blah. And I apologize for the arduous nature of it, but at the end of the day, we also want to learn from everyone else and who's using it and figure. So please give us feedback, because we're still building as well. But for those who are studying for the exams or just want to get some nice use cases, this is going to be really helpful. So just to let you know, when you go into our platform and use our bots, you should, and like I say, go to the support team if you need help getting there. They're pretty good. My team is pretty good. When you're using the bots, you have two options. You can use the 100% free on the platform. It's just like if you use ChatGPT. If you choose version 4, you have to pay for the version 4. These bots have that as well. So if you want to like a super Claude bot, then you would have to pay Poe a subscription, not us. We get nothing out of it, right? We've just built it for you. So please don't get angry if there's a subscription fee on Poe, but it does mean you get to use the Claude version. But there is a GPT version, which is free, and you can use that, as well, especially if you're just trading. When you go via our site, you can use the materials that are freely available, and you can program your bot with that. So you can enter that data and ask it questions. But again, you have to be smart and ask good questions, right? If you go, tell me where I should buy my coffee, it's going to tell you off, because the bot has been trained not to answer those questions. But if you say, I'm looking at chapter 3.5, planning business analysis approach, I want to know, how could I use this within my organization? And you upload the material that we provide, which means you've got to go through that arduous process of obtaining that material. It will probably give you a really good output. So touch, what's it? Cross fingers. but the better the question, the better that you feed it, the better the outcome. And it can actually give you use cases. It can give you actual examples. You can talk about different contexts to it. So it's pretty good, but it has been designed to help you learn. It hasn't been designed to help you run your business. So there will be some constraints in that, but please feel free to use that. We do have architecture courses. No one's full at the moment. And that's it.